I am typically the kind of person who says to people demanding answers on day 2, investigations sometimes take time, right? But when you're talking about a potential kidnapping, you don't have the time.
Well, that's why I feel like they broke down the door. Honest to God.
Yeah.
I would listen very carefully to all the language that was used. We have a court-authorized search. To me, that was every lead that says there's a possibility Mrs. Guthrie's alive and tied up and in someone's home, you break down that door and you don't wait for the warrant. And they're just going to go guns blazing to rescue her before they protect the judicial process later.
Hey, everyone, welcome to the show. So obviously there's a lot of stuff going on today, but one story that I have not focused on that much, but which I think about all the time is what has happened to Nancy Guthrie, Savannah Guthrie's mother. And so I want to focus on that today. I want to take your calls because I have so many questions about this, about why things have come out when they did, about what the authorities are doing and why. And so I'm hoping in a few moments we'll be joined by Ashley Banfield to talk to us about some of what is going on, and then we will take your calls. But one of the mysteries has been these sort of multiple ransom notes, right? And the issue with the ransom notes has been they're not being sent in the way a typical ransom note would be, right? Meaning, if you're sending a ransom note looking for money, you send it to the family. And here, instead, there's been, one guy who got arrested for sending a phony request for Bitcoin. Now you've got another one who's saying he wants, or they want Bitcoin in exchange for information about her. But, the problem with Bitcoin is once you transfer it, there's no getting it back. And so, it starts to feel like there are a lot of fraudsters out there.
So an hour and a half ago, we got kind of a bizarre letter, an email from somebody who says they know who the kidnapper is and that they have tried reaching Savannah's sister, Annie, and Savannah's brother to no avail. And they said they want 1 Bitcoin sent to a Bitcoin address that we have confirmed is active. It's a real Bitcoin address. As they put it, time is more than relevant. So we have no idea whether this is real or not, but they are making a demand. It's interesting that, Bitcoins fluctuate in value, but it's around $56,000 now, 1 Bitcoin, which is about the amount that the authorities are offering for information leading to the return of Nancy. So I don't know if that aligns, but whoever sent this, and they actually give a name and an email address, but whoever sent this.
Look, I appreciate that Harvey Levin is trying to, couch this in language to be careful, but I just don't see why we give it any credence, right? And the only reason we are is because we got nothing else, I think. But let me ask the great Ashley Banfield. If there's any crime story out there, she is the person you want to talk to. Her YouTube is exploding. And she is also a contributor to News Nation and an old friend. Ashley, good to see you. What do you make of this? Let's start with this ransom note stuff, right? There's been a number of ransom notes out there. One person's been arrested. Why do you think these are being taken even remotely seriously, and should they be?
I think it's a great question. And actually, a ton of my followers on Drop Dead Serious on the podcast have been commenting on that nonstop. Many of them super astute in crime, true crime coverage and sleuthing. And the fact of the matter is, Dan, you got to do it. Law enforcement has to do it. They have to run down all the leads. That's a big one. Some of them are crazy. On my podcast last night, I had Matt Murphy, who is a former homicide detective in California, who said, this is the frustration of big cases like this. When you get 4,000 leads that come in a 24-hour period, like they did after they dropped that horrifying video, you got to run them all down. they're in a basket of 3 different categories. People who are well-meaning, people who are absolutely crazy, and then people who may actually know something. And every lead has to be run down. I would say that the ransom, those overtures have to be looked at because those are crimes as well.
Yeah,
right. If they're not related, those are crimes and they're punishable by up to 10 years in some states.
So you mentioned the video, right? And I keep wondering about why it took so long. And I know on your Drop Dead Serious podcast, you have talked about this, about the timing of why did it take 9 days or whatever the amount of days it was to get the video. The answer we're getting is they didn't have a subscription. And as a result, they had to sort of go back and, work in partnership with the private sector. But does 9 days seem like a long time with that context?
So as it turns out, it was the FBI that got it. It wasn't Nest or Google, right? And it was the technology, scraping residual data from a back-end system. But it took the FBI to go to Nest and Google to say, we want to apply our savvy to your technology. And I'm shocked it took that long, but we're in a new and emerging, era of digital forensics and crime fighting. Maybe that's just what it takes. Legally, you got to first clear the legal hurdles and warrants, et cetera. And then technologically speaking, how do you do this? Maybe the FBI is the only group that has this kind of advanced technology. But I'm shocked that Nest and Google didn't have their own abilities.
Right. And do you think they still believe that this was a kidnapping?
Look, there's 2 ways of looking at what happened to Mrs. Guthrie. Either she was kidnapped alive or they took her out of that home dead. And I'm really hoping it's the former. I can only go with what the sheriff has said. They have no other reason to believe other than she's alive. And I think, Dan, one of the big examples that we may have seen came 2 nights ago when sheriff's deputies went blazing out of the Pima County Sheriff's Department with SWAT unit and a bomb squad unit. And they flew down to Rio Rico and they broke down the door of a man named Carlos and his mother-in-law. And Miss Josephina, I think was her name, told Brian Enton on News Nation, they broke down the door. I said, do you have a warrant? They said, we don't need one. I can only go on what she said. She said to Brian Enton, I asked them for a warrant. They said they don't need one, which got me thinking to the language that the Pima County Sheriff used, which was, we are enacting a court authorized search. That is not the same as a warrant. A court authorized search could very well mean the court authorizes us to break down a door under exigent circumstances. If we believe Mrs. Guthrie is tied up in a house somewhere, we don't need a warrant. We have exigent circumstances and we can break down that door. So a court authorized search may have meant the court authorizes us to do that without a warrant, which makes me think that, they did believe perhaps the other night that their tip that took them to Carlos's house, of course he was released and the search was finalized, might have been that they believed that she was in that home.
And one of the things, and this gets a little more slightly political, is the fact that it was immediately leaked that they were questioning a person of interest, right? Immediately when Carlos was detained. And this is the sort of thing that happens in investigations all the time, which are people get detained, they get questioned, they get released. But when you leak the fact that there is a person of interest being detained in a case of this kind of notoriety, you are immediately setting yourself up for failure. And here is, Ashley mentioned Carlos. Here he is, this is number 4, interviewed by ABC 15 in Arizona, talking about what happened.
And so how did this all start? How did they stop you here? You were driving here?
Yeah,
or?
my wife was driving.
Your wife was driving?
Because they were following me. And once I saw they were following me, I pulled over. They didn't even have to put a traffic stop or anything. I got off the car and they arrested me as soon as I got out the car. They didn't even tell me what was going on until the detectives got here, like 2 hours before I got arrested. And then the detectives got here. It was the FBI agent in Santa Cruz County. And they told me I was being detained for kidnapping. And I asked them, well, kidnapping of who? And they told me this lady, I don't know her name. And
Nancy Guthrie?
Yeah, that's her. And I told them, I work in Tucson for GLS. I might have delivered a package to your house, but I never kidnapped anybody. They hold me from like 4 to right now.
Ashley Banfield, host of the Drop Dead Serious podcast. Do we know anything more about why they had targeted Carlos?
There's some reporting that it was because of tips that had come in after the video that was released of the suspect at Nancy Guthrie's front door. There's other reporting that came from Fox Digital that said there were other leads, other cell phone data leads and other data leads, but very unspecific. And I was just interested to hear, there's multiple interviews with Carlos Palazuelos, right? In that interview, he actually gave me some more information that I hadn't heard in a different interview. In a different interview, he said, they asked me nothing. What did they ask you? Nothing. They didn't talk to me. But in this interview, he said, they asked me a few questions at the beginning. But it's interesting to hear that he said, I get, where were you? Who are you and where were you? It seemed to, he was intimating that those were the questions they asked him originally. But he was held for a number of hours. And actually, he was held in cuffs that were tight and injured his wrists. He said that his wrists were swollen and injured afterwards. I mean, they were dead serious on this guy, Dan. Whatever it was they received, he said, my mother-in-law was told he has the same eyes as the kidnapper on the video. That's what he said, during a television interview. Whether that's actually what happened or not, I don't know.
The number is 866-967-6887. Your opportunity to ask questions about what happened, because the truth is, as you can tell, certainly I don't have all the answers, and even Ashley Banfield doesn't have all the answers, which tells you that there are no answers to be given. But let's talk about something that broke today, and that is that TMZ is reporting that there's a new video of a guy, and I watched the video, with two knapsacks about, I don't know, it was like 20 minutes or so before the time that the guy in question is on the video at her house. Not the same knapsack, but he's got two knapsacks on. He's trying to unlock a gate, et cetera. It seems like it's like 5 miles away. And the TMZ reporting is that they are looking at this video. Thoughts on it?
I'm not putting a lot of stock in this, and forgive me if my timeline isn't exact, but I think it's pretty close. I listened to Harvey Levin's report, and what we know from the sheriff is that the very first they're telling us there was activity detected on Nancy Guthrie's cameras 1:47 a.m. There's activity as well at 2:12 a.m. The video in question, that's 5-ish miles away and about 19 minutes drive away, happens very close to the 1:47 a.m., but almost afterwards. So that video from 5 miles away is almost contemporaneous with the activity at Nancy Guthrie's house, and it's a long way away. So I'm really not putting a lot of stock in it.
What about the gloves that are being tested? And again, the question I'm getting is, well, why now? I mean, suddenly they find gloves that they're testing now, 11 days later. What do you make of these gloves?
So one glove was found. The New York Post was actually there when they found the glove, and they were videotaping. It almost looked as though they were on a ride along with the officers that found the glove. I looked at it very closely, Dan, and 11 days in the desert, I'm not so sure it would have looked that clean. That's just me. I have no inside information on that. However, there was an alternative report late last night. Trace Gallagher on Fox News said that there was a pair of gloves that Fox Digital learned had been found. I haven't heard more reporting on the pair of gloves. And Trace Gallagher used the words "in this area," but didn't say, he was standing in front of Nancy's house, but he didn't say what "in this area" means. That single glove was found 1.5 miles away. And Matt Murphy, the former, homicide prosecutor in California, said, if I had a dime for every time there was a glove found on the side of the road.
Right.
I mean, they're everywhere, literally everywhere. You've got workers constantly running those roads, and the back of their trucks are open, and things fly out all the time. So I'm not sure if it's going to mean anything, but I do know this. Gloves are forensic birthday presents, because hands sweat inside gloves, so there's just a boon of DNA. Fingerprints can actually be lifted from inside gloves, as long as there's not too much powder in them. And then on the outside of gloves, of course, if there's anything that ties to Nancy in any way, blood or DNA of any kind, then you've got yourself a major lead in the case.
Talking to Ashley Banfield, host of the Drop Dead Serious podcast. It's got a great YouTube presence with that as well. What is this tent that was set up outside? They put up a tent for like an hour and a half or something?
Yeah. So I am like, it was about an hour, a white tent, the kind that, broadcasters will often show up with, or, picnickers will show up with these little tented awnings to keep you covered from the sun. And they set it up right outside Nancy Guthrie's front arch entrance. And I will tell you what News Nation saw. They saw that camera equipment and height charts were brought in. And interestingly, this one really stood out to me. Fox News Digital, Michael Ruiz, who's just a great reporter, he said there was video imagery and physical science equipment being carried in, video forensics equipment, and that a member of this team also worked on the Koberger case. That was fascinating to me. One of the posts that Michael Ruiz put out said that it's possible he was told it might mean that investigators are taking another look at blood spots under black light. I'm not so sure about that. It's pretty bright out there no matter what. But what I am bothered by is how much traffic has gone in and out of that area. At this point, there's been a pizza delivery, a flower delivery. Several reporters have gone up and down and shot that. There have been all sorts of law enforcement who, I don't know if they had their forensic booties on. I'm not so sure what they're going to find that somewhere down the line, a defense attorney can't toss. But nonetheless, day 12, and that's what they're doing.
Well, and I am typically the kind of person who says to people demanding answers on day 2, investigations sometimes take time, right? But when you're talking about a potential kidnapping, you don't have the time. I mean, that's what makes this different than a typical investigation where I'd speak, why hasn't anyone been charged? It's like, hey, hang on. But here, if it really was a kidnapping, then time is of the essence.
Well, that's why I feel like they broke down the door. Honest to God.
Yeah.
I would listen very carefully to all the language that was used. We have a court authorized search. To me, that was every lead that says there's a possibility Mrs. Guthrie's alive and tied up and in someone's home, you break down that door and you don't wait for the warrant. Matt Murphy had something different to say. He said, I would have got it anyway. But you listen, everybody operates differently. And I tend to think that every second counts. And that's why I wondered if we're going to see more of that, if we're going to see more doors being broken down as tips come in that she might be alive and being held somewhere. And they're just going to go guns blazing to rescue her before they protect the judicial process later and a prosecution.
The number's 866-967-6887, talking about the Nancy Guthrie investigation with Ashley Banfield. Ashley, about a week and a half ago or so, you had reported that Nancy Guthrie's son-in-law, the brother-in-law, Annie's husband, was a possible suspect here. Any more information about that?
I can tell you that my source every day since has stood by that reporting. And that is the thinking as of the day after Mrs. Guthrie was reported missing. There were a couple of things I reported in that, Dan, if we go back to Tuesday of last week. Number one, that Annie Guthrie's car was towed and is in evidence. That's borne out. The sheriff did confirm that the car was towed as per warrant and, is being processed. That's what the sheriff said. The other thing my source said was that the cameras were smashed. Now we've seen the person coming up and trying to, as the sheriff now uses language, tamper and disconnect. But Michael Ruiz is reporting that there are small glass fragments seen underneath the camera in that front entrance, which would suggest that if he couldn't grab it with his hands or grab it with those shrubs. I don't believe he's trying to cover the camera with the shrubs, by the way. You don't get dangling flowers to cover a camera. I believe that he was actually trying, if you see his fist is really tightly around that shrub. I believe he was trying to get it between the Nest cam and its bracket to pull it off. That's what I believe he was actually doing. One of the commenters said that they saw that he seemed to be testing the strength of the shrubbery right after he pulled it. That would be very interesting. I can also tell you that there is a very, very tiny little space between a bracket and a Nest mount bracket and the Nest camera itself, barely enough to get a key between. So to get your fingers between to pull it off it's impossible. You would need something, a tool, maybe a strong vine to try to pull it off. And short of any of that, smash it. So I stand by the fact that my source said this, the cameras, plural, were smashed. And now Michael Ruiz is saying that there were small glass fragments seen underneath that camera mount. He also said, Back door was wide open. Sheriff was asked about that, said, I will not confirm that. Didn't say he denied it. And also said there was blood in the house and said that at this time, and again, this is within about 24 hours after the crime was committed, the brother-in-law may be the prime suspect in this case. And as you and I know, you said these are dynamic. Investigations are dynamic. They reserve the right to change their minds. And sometimes they do, and often they do. They get some evidence or information, and that it may preclude them from their original thoughts. But I see the amount of activity in Annie Guthrie's house, photographing for 3 hours in the nighttime, wearing gloves, carrying out evidence bags and stuff. That's the kind of thing where it stands to reason that they certainly are looking at investigating that household.
So your source still indicating that he is a suspect?
Nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. But I will say this, the day after I did that report, my source said things have really tightened up. The folks in the sheriff's department are worried about retaliation because of the leak. And I thought to myself, well, if it's not true, there wouldn't be any worry, you know? And then on the third day, he said, what I can tell you is when they take shots at you, you're standing on the target.
Because, you've gotten a lot of heat over this, and including suggestions, there's going to be lawsuits or this or that. I mean, have you heard from anyone directly?
No. And I will say this, I actually looked at some of the reporting of the threats of lawsuits, and it's the same outlet that reported I was going to sue Katie Couric. But I thought, I am? That was news to me. And it was the same outlet that said Chris Cuomo's going to Bigfoot Ashleigh off News Nation. He is? It didn't happen. So I think that particular outlet loves that headline in particular. They tend to repeat that headline a lot. No, not at all. And by the way, the truth is the best defense. And I have this on top authority. This is not untrue. And I will say this, Dan. I answer to one boss, and that is the truth. I don't work for the government. I don't work for the police. Will I put the tip line up? Absolutely. It's harmless. I will put the tip line up to help the police. Do I work in concert with the police? Absolutely not. And have the police worked at cross purposes with me? Absolutely. That's their right. I am not besmirching them for it. They have a hard job to do, and they are allowed to tell the media untruths. They're allowed to tell suspects untruths in their investigation. The law covers them for that. But it doesn't mean that I have to go along with it. And I learned that probably most stridently in the Kohberger case, because on December 19th, they discovered that the DNA under the knife sheath belonged to Brian Kohberger in 2022, December 19th. And on December 20th, the day after they learned that Brian Kohberger was the owner of that DNA, the Moscow police chief video recorded himself and posted it on the Moscow police chief website saying, there are no suspects in this case and no one should be reporting otherwise. And didn't use the word reckless, but said, you shouldn't be reporting anything other than what we officially tell you. There are no suspects in this case. Well, there was a suspect in the case. And for 2 weeks, they followed him across the country. And every person at a gas station or a motel was in his direct path of hell, because that man was insane and was reckless and was a murderer and killed strangers. And so for 2 weeks, there was a path of people across the United States who were in harm's way, and especially in Pennsylvania when he got to his home. And I think people deserve to know if there's someone dangerous in the community. I'll tell you, if my kid went to the universities in the jurisdiction where this happened, I would have pulled them home during that crime, knowing that guy was still out there. Instead, we were told nothing to worry about. It's a targeted attack. There's nobody out there. There's no concern. So that's why I do the work I do, because the police don't always tell you what's actually happening.
And do you think that the police here are telling, in your words, untruths about this?
They use very specific language. When they went, after my reporting, when they did their news conference, they said, we're not identifying a prime suspect in this case. That doesn't mean they don't have one. They were very specific to say we are not identifying. And everything I've seen since, other than people who use their words inaccurately or inartfully, that's the only language they've used. We're not identifying. That's very different.
We're just talking to Ashley Banfield. This is, I don't know how new this is, but I'm just getting it on my ABC internal email. The Pima County Sheriff's Department on Thursday issued a new request for video on the Ring Neighbors app. investigators are seeking footage from January 1st to February 2nd. So it looks like they're seeking broader time frame.
Dan, they're even more specific in the request. They're going door to door and asking neighbors for January 11th. Now they now want January the whole month, right?
They've gone wider than the January 11th request. I think
right.
Now we're requesting
they've gone
all
wider.
video footage that includes vehicles, vehicle traffic, people, pedestrians, anything you deem out of the ordinary or important. Our investigation from January 1st through February the 2nd.
But why the 11th? Like, what specifically is it about the 11th that they were targeting people for? You know, it's just a fascinating. There's been the report of an unusual white van in the neighborhood. I'm not sure if that was January 11th, but, you know, they're running down every lead. And of course, as those 4,000 leads came in, that generates a lot more investigative work. Got hundreds of officers working on this, all of them doing different things and following different rabbit holes.
Yeah. Let's take a couple calls here. Let's go to Richard in North Carolina. Richard, how you doing? What do you got?
Down here in North Carolina, we had a case where Michael Peterson pushed his wife down the steps, killed her, and they sealed the crime scene, unsealed the crime scene, sealed it back and forth, and then a freaking 3 weeks later, they find the murder weapon in the basement. I mean, and they don't know how long it's been there. Why weren't they shutting this place down? And that tent should have been up on day one.
Ashley Banfield.
It's a really, really good question. And I think that's where the Pima County Sheriff's really taken it on the chin, because he released that crime scene within 30 hours. Brian Enton, I think around 5 or 6 o'clock at night, was walking up on that front stoop and videotaping the blood. And he also said on Tuesday, after the crime. So the crime's committed Saturday night, Sunday morning. And on Tuesday, the press conference, he says, we have halted the search. I believe the search was actually halted on Monday, and said we've halted the search permanently. Well, what did they have and what did they know on that very first day of the week, on Monday? What did they have and what did they know from their Sunday investigation that had them halting the search and releasing the crime scene? They had to have had something or known something. Now, we also have heard that they didn't bring the FBI into the fold perhaps as fulsomely early enough. That doesn't mean they didn't bring them in at all. I just don't know that they were brought in en masse, until later on. That's been a criticism. But I'm just shocked that they stopped the search and released the scene. They had homicide detectives in there right away, right? That tells you that they had their suspicions. There's blood on the stoop, for God's sake. It's a great question. How on earth did that happen?
Harvey Levin, who is also someone who is very plugged in the crime world. I've known Harvey since the O.J. Simpson days. He has been getting tips and videos and information, ransom notes in connection with this case. And they have released today a video that they say that the authorities are looking at of a guy with 2 backpacks on, about 20-something or 20 minutes or so before the guy on the video at the home of Nancy Guthrie can be seen trying to deactivate the system or whatever he was doing. Let's listen. This is Harvey Levin today talking about this new video.
Obtained a second email from the man who claims to know the identity of Nancy Guthrie's kidnapper. We told you yesterday that this man sent us an email saying that he will reveal the name if he gets 1 Bitcoin. We checked the account all day. He did not receive anything. The account is bare. So this morning, just after 8 a.m. Pacific time, he sent us this other email complaining that he is not being taken seriously. He says that he wants the Bitcoin, which is worth around $67,000, for several reasons. Number one, he says by coming forward, he will become as he puts it, a national rat. He also says, and this is a quote, he doesn't want to be, quote, incriminated like that guy Carlos. Remember, Carlos is the delivery man who was taken into custody a couple of days ago. Briefly, he was detained and then released. He says that he fears retaliation if he comes forward, and that he needs the Bitcoin because he's going to have to lay low after coming forward. And then he talks about a difference between yesterday and today. And we are not going to get specific about what he's talking about. It is chilling what he is insinuating here. But we have told law enforcement we're not going to get specific about that. But he makes it very clear here that this will be his second and last attempt. We have checked the Bitcoin address.
Ashley Banfield, what do you make of this report from TMZ?
Well, it's jaw-dropping, frankly, because if you look at the timeline that the sheriff has given us, 1:47 a.m., he says doorbell camera disconnects. When they released this video, they said was tampered with and disconnects, but they didn't say 1:47 a.m. Clearly, this is a doorbell cam that we see this guy, messing with. And, I've got a lot of theories about what he's actually doing with all that brush and leaves. But at 2:12 a.m., the language that's used by the sheriff is software detects person on camera, but no video available. My source said there were cameras plural and that they were smashed. So cameras plural would mean maybe the back door has it and the front door has it. But what is fascinating is if this front door video is at 2:12 a.m., what happened at 1:47 a.m.? Right? That's key here. I don't put stock in the video that Harvey Levin was showing because it's 1:52 a.m. It's in between those two things. And this is a 19 to 20 minute drive away. So I'm not so sure that's connected, but I do find it fascinating. Also, Dan, I noticed something and it took me a while, kind of feel like an idiot for not having seen it right away. But when Kash Patel released all the images, he released video and he released still shots, right? Yeah. The videos all show the same thing. So do all the still shots except for one. And one still shot shows the kidnapper, the perpetrator, wearing no backpack and no gun. And he's outside the archway. So he's approaching the door, but he does not have the backpack and he does not have the gun on. So is that 2:12? Is that what happened afterwards? Because why would someone who means harm take the gun off and be unarmed and take the kit, whatever he's brought, except for the fact that whatever he needs to subdue is already subdued? So that's why I'm thinking that perhaps in this collection that we got, maybe that image is 2:12 a.m. And then at 1:47 a.m., the initial approach, he's fully kitted up with everything he needs for this crime.
Fascinating. Before we go back to some calls, Ashley Banfield, what about the pacemaker? I mean, Nancy Guthrie had a pacemaker, and initially it was said, well, it's disconnected from her phone, but that doesn't mean it's not functioning, et cetera. What do you know about it?
Something I discovered about this, and I go back to my conversation with Matt Murphy, who knows so much about sort of the forensic issues that you're dealing with when you're trying to A, find someone, and then B, prosecute someone who took that victim. And he said, pacemakers don't stop working if a victim dies. Okay, that's key. So wherever Nancy is alive or dead, her pacemaker is still going. And it would also reconnect to her phone if the phone got near. So we did some digging at Drop Dead Serious, and we discovered that the Bluetooth distance for a pacemaker is between 10 and 30 feet. It's frustrating because Matt sort of thought, what if you had buzzed over neighborhoods, with the phone very, very close to the roof lines, hoping that maybe something would pick up with your pacemaker? That's not necessarily going to work. Certainly gumshoeing and going door to door could get you 10 to 30 feet from a pacemaker. But it was really interesting to hear that could still be a crime-fighting tool in their arsenal to try to find her.
Fascinating. Talking to Ashley Banfield, let's go back to some of your calls. Justin is in Tucson, Arizona. Justin, how you doing? What do you got?
Good. Thanks again for having me on. I was just calling because I grew up in that neighborhood. I grew up with Savannah. I know that family really well, and they're just the kindest people, and I'm hoping for a good result. But so I've been following this case, and the one thing I haven't heard is how did the guy get into the house? Like, did he break a window? Was the door open? That's the one piece that's been baffling me.
Ashley Banfield?
So my source told me that there was indeed forced entry. I think that the sheriff has waffled on that slightly. Again, I'd have to go back to his exact language. I think that his exact language, he wouldn't confirm or deny that there was forced entry. My source also told me the back door was wide open. Now, lots of people have different definitions for what back door wide open means. Some people say back door is wide open if it's unlocked. Some people say back door is wide open if it's left open. But I will leave that to the interpretation of others, because the language that was used to me from my sources that the back door was wide open.
Yeah. Does that answer your question, Justin?
Also, Justin, very, very good question, because we've all since learned that the spotlights on the back, right over the back door, were indeed, let's say the word, smashed. They were left dangling on their wires. And the language that was used to me about the cameras is that the cameras were smashed. So it just lends more credence to the fact that all of that happened. There was activity at the back door. There was activity at the front door. And I'll also say, if you look at the aerial view of Nancy Guthrie's home, if you were to bring a car around to the garage, you're really out of view of anything from the front road. If your car is at the front door, you are in view of the front road. You can see it in Brian Enton's live shots. He stands there and you can see Nancy Guthrie's front door from the road. So if you're going to pull a person struggling or a body in a bag, it would stand to reason you wouldn't want to maybe do it out the front door, notwithstanding, and I know that Justin probably knows this, how incredibly dark it is there. And Dan, you probably already know this. It's dark for a reason. This neighborhood has an agreement with the University of Arizona to have no street lights and no lights, because they actually, it's an observatory area for research, for, astronomy research. So there's a reason it's as dark as it is. And so again, notwithstanding that it's dark, you probably wouldn't want to be seen at all, car going by, bringing someone or a body or anything out of the front door.
Justin, answer your question?
Yeah, I guess so. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Let's go to New Jersey and Brian. Brian, how you doing? What do you got?
How you doing? Listen, the head of the person responsible for the FBI disgraced herself and embarrassed the country yesterday in her testimony. She, because she misled the country on the economy. S&P is down for the year as of today, by the way.
I did this topic all day yesterday. There was plenty of opportunity. Is there something related to today's topic on this, on Nancy Guthrie?
It leads me to the question, which is, she's responsible for the FBI. Now, the FBI, from what I understand, has had their budget cut. There's no doubt there are a lot of guys demoralized. Trump declared war on the FBI when he came back into power. I'm just wondering if some of these cuts have made them less effective, and are we all in more danger than we were before Trump took over? Because frankly, they've not distinguished themselves to date in their performance in this investigation. They've had tougher cases that they solved faster.
Well, I guess I'd say a few things. First of all, I do think the FBI has suffered under Kash Patel, but I don't know that it's suffered as much when it comes to basic crime assessment and sort of what the FBI has long done best. If you told me that, there was a terror attack and, we had cuts in some of the foreign surveillance, or if there were cuts, for example, election security, other areas that this administration has decided are not significant. Okay. But the rank and file in the FBI are largely still there, and they're really good at what they do. Now, Ashley Banfield, you made the point that the FBI may have been called in too late into this one to start their cooperation.
That's a good point. And your caller makes a good point. I will give it the antithesis to that. And that is that, yes, they apparently weren't welcomed into the fold right away. That's not always done. Let's be clear. Investigations start locally, and then they branch out and bring in the expertise of the FBI. That's not unusual. So we shouldn't slam the local sheriff, too hard for that, because I don't know exactly how long too long is. I don't know how many days it took for the FBI. It seemed like they were there in a pretty good amount of time. Just ask the Ramseys how long it took for the FBI to get on their case. Almost forever. That's too long for sure. But I will say this about Kash Patel, and I'm not being political here. I'm just going to use his words. He said they were able to, and these are his words, I'll quote him. We were able to exploit information pursuant to our private sector partner engagement that showed us that there might be persons of interest in and around the area related to this event. And so first and foremost, our priority is to find Nancy Guthrie. And of course, right behind that is to find anyone and any others involved in this kidnapping. And there's a space in between here and another question from Sean Hannity, but he answers, I do believe we are looking at people who, as I say, are persons of interest in this case. So Kash Patel talked about that the FBI was able to do this with Nest, bring in their guns, their tech savvy, and actually extract this video where Nest and Google apparently had told the local authorities, sorry, we're at our wits' end, we have nothing to offer. So what you can say what you want politically about the FBI, et cetera, but in this particular case, in this particular moment, they did a good job and they were able to get this video. And I think understandably, that's really hard to do. And arguably, this is the number one piece of evidence in the case.
Yeah. The only thing that I would push back on is that I wouldn't take Kash Patel too literally when he says persons of interest. There may be, but
I was just shocked he said it 3 times.
Yeah,
he's a lawyer,
no, I know.
Right? He's a practicing criminal defense attorney, and I figure he should know.
He's in so far over his head, but that is political. Ashley Banfield, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. Drop Dead Serious is the name of her podcast. It is available everywhere. And as I said, I watch it on YouTube, and it is blowing up. Ashley, great to have you. Thank you.
Always good to see you, Dan. Thanks so much for having me.
Is there anything more you can share? You said the president was reviewing that surveillance footage. What was his initial reaction when seeing those disturbing images? And does he believe that suspect acted alone?
I haven't talked to him specifically about the second point on whether the suspect acted alone or not. So I don't want to weigh in on the president's thinking on that. His initial reaction, of course, as all Americans, is just pure disgust. And again, it's heartbreaking to see now this footage really bring to life a story we've all been reading about. And again, we're just praying for the safety of Nancy Guthrie and that she will return home soon. And the president directed me to please encourage all Americans with any information to call the FBI. And we hope that this case will come to a positive resolution as soon as possible.
That is, of course, Caroline Leavitt, the spokesperson for the president, talking on Tuesday about the surveillance footage in the Nancy Guthrie case. Let's go back to some of your calls. Lynn is in New York. Lynn, how you doing? What do you got?
Hi, Dan. Thanks for taking my call. I was curious about the staff that might have been employed by Nancy, like a home health aide or cleaning staff. We haven't heard anything about that. And I was also wondering why the brother-in-law, Savannah Guthrie's brother-in-law was a suspect. Right.
Well, I don't know if we knew the why. And again, Ashley's not here to answer that. I think if the why was answered, that'd probably be further along in this investigation, right? I think that from my understanding is that Ashley was reporting that they were the last ones to have seen Nancy Guthrie. And so obviously they become people you question, et cetera. But beyond that, I don't know. With regard to the household staff, I am certain that they are continuing to investigate everyone and anyone who had any connection to that household. I mean, that's where you start an investigation, right? You start an investigation with the people who are closest. You start the investigation from the people who know the person. I mean, the chances of a stranger coming in and killing or abducting someone is much less likely than someone the person knows. Doesn't mean it didn't happen in this particular case. And look, and by the fact that they are now asking for more information from neighbors about this wide area of January 1st to February 2nd does seem to indicate that they're looking beyond the people who knew the family. So good questions, Lynn. But again, some of them we don't have answers to at this particular moment.